Please let me introduce your presenters for this session. I would like to start with the introduction for Erin. Erin Marancana is the director for Shear Group. Erin is a value-driven individual with more than 25 years experience in business process management and information technology alignment, strategy execution, training, coaching, and change management. She has expertise in leading multiple functional teams while meeting aggressive business objectives and is adept at addressing the ever-changing business environment, turning issues into solutions. Erin is a systematic thinker and knows how to organize people and activities into efficient workflows. Erin also leads Shear's US operations activities and is always committed to producing results that exceed expectations. Erin, thank you very much for joining us today. And moving on to Stephanie. Stephanie is a business process senior consultant at Shear Americas with a great knowledge of BPM methods and tools. Trained in process analysis, management, and improvement initiatives, Stephanie is detail orientated, has expertise in project management, as well as leadership skills. She has excellent critical thinking skills and is focused on problem solving. Stephanie has experience in research environments and related environments and processes. Her experience in fast-paced environments allows her to be agile in continually changing environments. Stephanie is passionate about efficiency and excellence and strives to achieve quality results consistently. Again, Stephanie, thank you for joining as a presenter, and I will now hand you over to Erin and Stephanie.
Thanks, Brian. This is the agenda for today. So first, we'll talk about what is a successful digitalization and what that looks like within your organization. Then we'll talk about the top-down approach on how to achieve that successful digitalization. Then we'll talk about a bottom-up approach, and finally, a combined approach to a successful digitalization. And then at the end, we will take your questions. All right, so let's talk about what is a successful digitalization and what that actually looks like. So it starts with having your processes in a process repository and really having them in a digital environment so that you can put data behind them and have them all linked together within your company. So then you can use those and have your people in your company work on process improvement projects. You can use that for change management. You can use that for training and things like that, and really tie your people and your processes together with that technology. And then in turn, that will improve your products and services for your company because you are improving your processes by connecting all of these things together in your digital environment. Okay, so in order to achieve a successful digitalization, you will utilize BPM initiatives, and we have a bunch listed here, but where do you start, right? So you want to ask the question in your organization, do you want to start from a top-down approach, meaning, creating an operating model, looking at your end-to-end, or do you want to start from a bottom-up approach and look at the process level and really the task level information in your organization? And so today, we're going to describe both methods as well as a combined method, and then we'll describe some of the initiatives in detail and how you would use those to achieve the success of your digitalization within your company. And now I will hand it over to Erin, who will talk about the top-down approach.
Thanks, Stephanie. So a top-down BPM approach for successful digitalization helps an organization to define the company at its highest level. The initiatives contained therein for successful digitalization support a more innovative approach for process improvement. This does not mean, as you look at this image, that your organization must complete all of these initiatives. However, for a top-down approach, it makes more sense to conduct them in a linear fashion to drive organizational value for a successful digitalization. Now I'm going to take you through some of these initiatives to offer you a better understanding of what a top-down approach looks like. So what we're looking at here, and the first thing that you want to look at for a top-down approach, is to define your target operating model. Your target operating model is sometimes what we call a company on a page, and that allows for viewing your organization from what we call the what, not the how, but the what. What is your company doing? And this allows for then the decomposition later on of your processes. So the conversations that we're having with your subject matter experts and your stakeholders at this point allows for that very high level view into the organization and really sets the stage for everything moving forward when you're going into your BPM initiatives. So if we look at the right-hand side with this SmartWorks example company, if we look right here, we have your level 1s and your level 2s. So if one of the level 1s is develop vision and strategy, the conversation that we're having with our subject matter experts is, what do you do? Not the how, but the what do you do? So we would say, what do you do within developed vision and strategy? And they might say, manage vision and strategy, manage strategic initiatives, manage marketing and communication. And then to define the level 3, then we're asking additional detailed questions with, well, what exactly do you do for manage vision and strategy? And that then sets the stage for your level 1, your level 2, and your level 3. So then we have a really good idea of what the company does when you're looking at your top-down approach. So then now that we have defined that very high-level operating model, now what we're going to do is look at your process prioritization. And what we mean by that is one of the things that our clients struggle with is, where do we begin? How do we take what we've defined in the operating model and really get the most bang for our buck? And some of our organizations will look at their processes and say, oh, we're going to start here, except for the fact that that might not drive the most value in the organization. So what you really want to look at is defining your high impact, low maturity processes. So what we do is we take those level 3 processes that we've just identified in your target operating model, and we allocate those, and we have high level conversations with your stakeholders to define your value drivers. Now, the value driver conversations in these workshops can be really interesting because the value drivers are what an organization needs to or has to get right within the organization. So when we start out with these conversations, we can actually start out with 50 or 60 value drivers. That's way too much to manage. So what we really need to do in those conversations is really align with your stakeholders and say, what exactly do we need to do? And we normally identify somewhere between 8 to 12 value drivers that we then have to link up to those level 3 processes. We then weight those, and we also do a maturity assessment in reference to aligning all of that information. There's a lot of calculations and things we do behind the scenes to make sure that we're driving the best value, and then we're putting that information together. But what we're looking to come out of that are the high impact, low maturity processes, because what that helps us to do is to really focus within the processes that are going to give us the most bang for your buck. And that's going to help us to then move into the second initiative, which is then, what processes do we need to create and capture within the organization? So there's 3 main things that we want to look at when we're capturing the processes. And the first thing that we want to make sure is that we want to capture them in a systematic, structured way, and we want to use a method. So if we look right here, the method that we're using, and the one that we normally do about 99% of the time, is what we call BPMN, Business Process Model and Notation. And the reason why we want to use that structured methodology approach is because whether I'm creating a process, or Stephanie is creating a process, or Brian's creating a process, you want to make sure that it is the same exact information in a structured, formalized way. And the reason for that is because you want to make sure that it's, based on 2, what number 2 is that you want to be able to do this in a cloud-based BPM repository for collaboration, because you're creating those BPM processes, or those as-is processes, specifically for your audience. What is the value that you're eventually driving for the organization? And the reason why you're doing that is, as we move into the second piece, which is to analyze the information. On that third piece, so the first is the systematic, structured way in which you're creating those processes. The second is to make sure that you're capturing it in a BPM repository for collaboration. And the third is that when you're capturing this information for your as-is processes, you're going to be doing that in an end-to-end manner to create transparency. And that transparency then will allow for future transformative change. Because what you're doing with these business process model and notation, these BPMN processes, what you're doing then is you're linking those back up to that target operating model so that you have the full end-to-end transparency and navigation within the repository that will allow then for that transformative change. That transformative change then begins with the analysis, which is that other phase that we're talking about. The analysis then, or the analytical piece, is then to look at those as-is processes and to say, what are we going to improve? So what you're looking at is identifying improvement opportunities. So when you're identifying improvement opportunities, we're having conversations with the subject matter experts, and we're really looking at those processes in a manner in which we can say, are there automation opportunities? What can we do with the roles? How can we improve it? What are our bottlenecks? What are the media breaks? Where is the process not working? Where can it be more efficient? Where can it be more effective? So that's the information that we want to capture. And the reason why we're capturing that information is because when we move forward with that, what we want to do then is create your to-be processes. So we've captured that as-is information, so you have what you're doing now. We've analyzed that information to identify improvement opportunities, and then we're going to take the information that you've captured there, and then we're going to create your to-be future state world. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the information from a data perspective, a role perspective, your functional information, your system information, and we're going to create those to-be processes in a manner in which will move forward your future state. So what we're looking at here is maybe you can eliminate some of the work that we analyzed in the as-is processes and then into your improvement opportunities. Maybe you have been talking about implementing an automation tool. So you're looking at what can be automated. Maybe you're looking at timing information. Where have you been able to reduce time and things like that? So now that you have your as-is, you've then analyzed them, and then you've taken that information, and then you've created your to-be processes. The next step, or what possible next step could be, is a simulation process or a simulation initiative. So what we're looking at here is, I'm going to take a step back because you don't always have to do a simulation. But what you're going to do if you do a simulation is, I always tell our clients the first thing to do is figure out what your purpose is. So when you're looking at a simulation, are you implementing an automation tool? Are you going through a merger? Are you looking for the most efficient and effective way to move forward with the new information that you have? Are you looking at cycle time? Are you trying to scale? What is it that you're looking to do within the simulation? And once you've identified the purpose for what you're doing, then that's the way to move forward within the simulation. So for example, then what you're going to do is you're going to take your as-is processes, your to-be processes, and then you're going to start having conversations with your subject matter experts to specifically capture data. And what I mean by data is you want to capture frequency information with your subject matter experts. So you're going to ask them about how often does the declination path happen? How often does the happy path happen? You're going to ask them about times. So frequencies, timing information for execution time. How long does it take you to get this task done? Is there any wait times between handoffs and things like that? And then we're also going to capture costing and resourcing information with calendars. So, where do your resources lie? How much information and cost information do we have to apply within the simulation? And then lastly, what we're going to do is we're going to create those as-is and to-be scenarios, and we're going to run the simulation. Once the simulation is run, that's going to provide a lot of data and information that we're going to analyze. And then out of that simulation data, we're going to go back to the purpose of the simulation and align that with what was our goal. Again, are we looking at scalability? Are we looking at cycle time? Are we looking at reduction of costs? Are we looking at an automation opportunity? So does it line up? For example, one of the clients that we were working with was looking to implement an automation tool. So what they were looking at is between the as-is processes and the to-be processes that we had captured, they wanted to make sure that the to-be state was a minimum of 50% cost effective. So we wanted to really make sure that those numbers were 50% less from a cost perspective. And the cycle time, we were looking at specific numbers. So did we meet that threshold criteria for them to say, yes, this is a good investment? So that's where you want to really take your simulation, is making sure that you're lining up the purpose with the information and the simulation between your as is and to be, to drive value for that business case within your organization. So what we're looking at next, if we go back to the original to be process, is we're looking at creating work packages and then how we then apply those work packages to our future roadmap. And we're talking about your BPM roadmap. So can we take some of that to be information that we created and apply those to quick wins within the organization? Can we take some of that to be information and apply that to bigger areas within the organization? And then also, can we standardize this information from an institutional perspective? And then when we're looking at that information, you also want to make sure, I'll go all the way back to as is with my very structured and systematic approach. You want to make sure that you're doing this from a work package perspective and defining your information. What's the description of your work package? So what exactly are you doing? And then from a value perspective, what is the value that doing this initiative is going to do for the organization? Being very, very clear for when you implement that in either wave 1, 2, and 3, what is doing this going to provide the organization? And then making sure to align the information within the organization with timing, resourcing, and then even down here, aligning that possibly to your value drivers. What value are we going to provide to the organization, and where is that going to hit within your value drivers as well within the organization? So aligning that all the way from back when we were talking about the enterprise and the target operating model to our strategy and our value drivers, and then linking up to the very specific work packages and how to put those forth within your BPM roadmap. So if we take a look at the top-down approach and some of the initiatives that I just went through, what are some of the pros and what are some of the cons with implementing this top-down approach? So the first thing that we look at is that systematic value-driven approach through the process impact assessment. When we take the top-down approach, we can really see how we impact the organization, because we've aligned our strategy to a focused approach with our processes. Because we now have your target operating model, you have aligned your value drivers, and you specifically know where to focus within the organization with your high impact, low maturity processes. And then also you have increased transparency across the organization, because then you have that end-to-end view. Again, you have that target operating model, which is that business on a page, or excuse me, that company on a page, and you've linked that down through your decomposition of that level 3, so the how, the as-is processes, and you have that complete transparency across the organization, that end-to-end view. And because you have that, you then also have a transformative change when you apply your work packages, as well as your wave 1, wave 2, and wave 3, as you move forward within the organization for a much larger implementation of change. From a con perspective, it can be a little bit longer time to your first value, because you are working on that, excuse me, that top-down approach and creating that target operating model. There's a lot of stakeholders that we need input from, especially when we're talking about the process impact assessment and creating those value drivers. Sometimes it's just a little bit longer time to value. Also, change management can be a little bit more challenging because it's driven through top management and aligning that. And sometimes it requires a little bit higher of a BPM maturity. So that's something that you want to think about when you're looking at your top-down approach. So I'm going to turn this over to Stephanie as she walks you through a bottom-up approach. Stephanie?
All right, so Erin talked about, your end-to-end view and prioritization and your overarching business strategy, but now we're going to talk about the bottom-up approach. And that basically means starting from your task level processes. So instead of, starting from the top and looking at your operating model, we're going to start looking at processes as the first step. And we have this roadmap here. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to do every single initiative linearly in this chart, but there are some activities that you can do in order to implement this bottom-up approach at your organization. Okay, so I'll talk about those initiatives now, starting with process mining. So process mining is a really great technology where you can plug in your applications and your software into a process mining software, and you can get a ton of data on your processes in real time. So basically, you say, what is our process? So it'll show you your main process, basically the happy path, and then it'll show you all of the variance that's going on that other people are taking that may necessarily not be good for your process. So, so that's process conformance. And then you can also look at process performance, where you get KPIs on things like cost data and efficiency and things like that. So it's a really great tool to get all of the information of your processes, what's really happening in your current state at your organization. Once you do a process mining initiative, you get really great information on what's really going on, which is your current state or your as-is processes. And you can take that information and then create to-be process models with your subject matter experts. So in order to do this, you would take all of the data from your process mining and look at, what are the variants? Do we have any issues? Do we have, never-ending rework loops where, people are going back to the beginning, or, what's really going on and how can we fix that? And so through this, you can use that data and you can create your to-be model in order to improve your process. And those improvement opportunities, again, will come from your process mining. So where Erin talked about, doing subject matter expert interviews and capturing your as-is processes, and it's a little bit more of a manual type project, this is all based on the digital technology of process mining. So once you have your to-be process, now again, this is similar to what Erin talked about, you define your work packages and your roadmap. And this is very similar, a very similar situation. So you're gonna define all of your work packages, you're gonna put in your impact of those work packages. You may not necessarily be tying it to a value driver because you didn't look at value drivers in the bottom-up approach. We went straight to looking at processes and the task level and not looking at the overarching business strategy, but you can still get an impact assessment, things like that. And then you do your roadmap. So this will most likely have a lot more quick wins because you're not going to get a bigger transformative change necessarily out of starting at this bottom-up level. But again, you can make your roadmap, have your wave 1 with your quick wins, your wave 2 with your bigger gains, and then your wave 3 with your more transformative change if that comes out of that. So let's talk about the pros and cons now. So the pros from a bottom-up approach are that you're able to monitor and assess issues and improvement opportunities quickly. And again, that's by using this process mining digital technology, because you're looking at your processes in real time. So in real time, you're seeing, oh, there's an issue in this process, we need to go fix that. Let's create a to-be process to improve this process. And then you can implement that quickly with your change management. And then another pro is your work packages and your implementation plan will be very data driven. So instead of getting information from subject matter expert interviews, you're getting real data from process mining. So the work packages will have a lot more data driven information in it rather than human emotion type information that may come out of subject matter interviews. Another pro is that it doesn't necessarily require you to have higher BPM maturity, because if you're using a process mining technology, will create your process for you based on what is actually happening within your organization. So you don't necessarily have to know how to model in BPMN right off the bat, right? The process mining technology will do that for you. Another pro is there will be less top management requirements. So because we're using a digital technology, a lot more analysts will be involved, a lot more subject matter experts will be involved rather than top management, because you're starting at your task level information. You're not looking at your end-to-end organization, your overall strategy. And then another pro is your incremental improvement at a process level. So again, you can quickly go through your processes, make those incremental improvements at your process level. Most of the time, it'll be more quick, quick value type improvements and things like that, not necessarily transformative change. So now, if we look at the cons, they're a little bit all connected, right? Because there's no prioritization of processes. It may not align with your strategy. Missed opportunities for high impact process improvements, and manual processes are overlooked. And this is because you didn't start with that strategy phase, right? You just went straight into, let's plug our processes into the process mining and see what's going on. But you didn't prioritize. So, there may be a process that you're doing that you missed that could have a high impact for your organization, but you didn't plug that into the process mining. You started with something else. Again, process mining mainly looks at your automated processes, like your application, your software, things like that. If there's a manual process that has a high impact, you may be missing that because you can't hook that up to the process mining necessarily. You would have to do all of that manually. So, the cons mostly have to do with, you're not gonna align with your strategy. You're not gonna know the full potential of the impact that your processes will have for your improvement opportunities and things like that. And then now I will hand it back over to Erin to talk about the combined approach.
Thanks, Stephanie. So for a combined approach, so we deal with clients that are all over the place. So we have some clients that take that systematic approach to start with a top-down approach, and they systematically start out very, very structured. And then we have, certainly, as Stephanie talked about, some clients that invest in the process mining, and they will start out right with the data-driven approach from a bottom-up approach, or from just capturing their processes. So they just have a certain area that they want to concentrate on. So what is a combined approach? And that combined approach is, we always have specific conversations with our clients to find out what exactly they're looking for, how do they want to start, what is the purpose behind it, and how do we drive value specifically for them within their organization. So an example of a combined approach is recently we had been working with a client, and they had a mandate that they had to capture all of their processes in their organization because they were implementing a future ERP system. So that's where we started. So it was technically a bottom-up approach, even though that they weren't utilizing mining at the time, but they really needed to start out with that very lower level as-is capture. So we straight just went right into as-is capture. However, what we did was, for each of the functional areas, we then created an operating model on the functional level, so that we kind of created a step-by-step operating model, because we had to capture all of the processes within the organization. So what we did was, we captured the as-is processes, and at the same time, then we started to small steps work into the operating model, so that the ending result of that as-is process capture was that we had a operating model that we then needed to vet. So that's what we did. Then we worked backwards into the operating model, and then we aligned with the stakeholders to say, hey, when we worked with all of your subject matter experts, we put this information together, and then we have this operating model. So then once we did that, when they were looking at the ERP system, they decided that, hey, I think probably the best approach now is to do a process impact assessment, because what we really want to find out is where in the organization is it going to make sense for us to start? Because when we started talking about the operating model, there were a lot of people or subject matter experts and stakeholders that certainly had their hands up with, you know, start here, start there, start here. So where did it make sense for the organization to put their efforts? So then what we did was we looked at the process impact assessment, and we had workshops and with regards to what I spoke about before to define their value drivers and to look at their high impact, low maturity processes. So one of the things that we look at for a combined approach is what makes sense for the organization. How do we do that? And again, although the company that we were working with, they started out with creating their as-is processes, their ultimate goal was to create the to-be processes. So we were kind of ping-ponging back and forth between starting at that low level as-is processes, then very organically we were creating the operating model, but then trying to figure out where to start. We then popped into the process impact assessment, but then we moved over to create those processes without doing an analysis, because we had identified that information from the ERP approach. So again, what you want to do is to make sure that you're addressing the client and yourselves from what makes sense for you. So one of the recommendations that we say is whether you're approaching a top-down or a bottom-up, or you're looking at a combined approach, what you really want to do is to make sure that each of the initiatives is done correctly. So do you have the right BPM tool? Do you have the right collaboration mechanisms in place? Do you have the right resources? Do you have the right allocation of skill sets? So, you know, from a skill set perspective, if you're starting with mining, you need some technology skills. You know, Stephanie said, you know, you don't need as much BPM skills if you're doing a bottom up, but if you're doing a top down, you might need a little bit more BPM skills. So really making sure that each of the initiatives, instead of just, oh, we're going to go top down and systematically have to do this, or we're going to go bottom up and just straight do it with data, making sure that you really have the right information, people in place to move that forward, to make sure that you're driving the most value for what you want to do within your organization is truly key. So thank you so much for your time. But what are our key takeaways for today? So what is a successful digitalization? Stephanie talked a little bit about that, and you're really looking at putting that digital technology in place to be able to capture your processes to drive value. You're looking at your products and services, you're linking that up with people, and we talked about doing that in a repository. When you're looking at your top-down approach, we're really looking at starting at that very high level, creating that company on a page to define your strategy, and then linking that up with your processes for that end-to-end view. When we're looking at the bottom-up approach, we're really looking at that from a data-driven perspective, or if you're doing that mining, you're pulling in the data and you're starting out from a process perspective, and then you're working your way up. And then from a combined approach, what you're really looking at is what does it make sense for the organization, whether or not you're pulling from the top down first or you're pulling from the bottom up first, and really making sure that you have the right pieces in place that you're going to have a successful BPM road in front of you. So making sure that you have the right resources, the right tools, the right skills to really drive the value within your organization. So thank you so much for your time here today. On behalf of SHEER, Stephanie and I have really appreciated that.